1970 Chevelle. I'm gonna save everybody and myself the embarrassment of the Wooderson all right impression, because this thing is damn near a clone of the famous, at least famous to me, Dazed and Confused 1970 black and white Chevelle. Quite possibly the most badass muscle car of all times. So we've done a lot of survivor cars lately, a lot of trucks, lots of different things. But what we haven't done is any of these super duper high profile, high end, somewhat show cars. This one kind of bridges the gap between show car and cruiser. I think most people would look at this car, they saw it on the SEMA show floor, they've seen it at indoor car shows, and you'd probably say to yourself, man, that's a nice trailer queener. I'll bet that dude's never gonna drive that thing, or must be nice. It's a driver, and it's a hell of a driver. This particular car we built for a gentleman out of California. His name is Brent, and Brent is a cabinet maker, and Brent builds super duper high-end cabinets. And what I've noticed with cabinet makers is that they like things really, really nice. I think when you're used to flawlessly fitting cabinet doors and joinery and all that cool woodwork and stuff every day of your life, you develop a OCD and an eye for detail like nobody else has. So when we started this project, Brent saw the previous 70 Chevelle that we did for Matt Saxton years back, and he wanted something that was a step up from that. A little bit more detailed, or a lot more detailed, I should say. Right out of the gate, it was great. Sitting down, talking to Brent, laying out the details, understanding what he was looking for, and being able to dive into this project from day one, knowing exactly how we wanted to pursue it. So the plan was always to make a very original looking 1970 Chevelle, but clean up all the imperfections and all the things that you really can't tidy up on just a resto mod or a restoration, which means it becomes expensive. Okay, there's lots and lots of one-off machine parts, lots of CAD design parts, tons of engineering. To the untrained eye, when you look at this, it just looks like what a 1970 Chevelle is supposed to look like. So it's often overlooked, I think, when it hit the car show scene. The general public doesn't quite get it, but the builders do. I think every builder that looked at this car noticed just how unbelievably detailed it was. And I don't even know where to begin on this. So I'm just gonna start babbling, because you start at the front of this thing and you get to the back, and this car has thousands and thousands of modifications. So let's give you just a general overview here that the car is sitting on a SPEC chassis. So for those of you who sometimes think that the SPEC chassis is somewhat of the budget line, it has a budget price point, but there's nothing really budget about it, because when you look at the stance of this car, stance is phenomenal, ride quality phenomenal, performance really, really good. It does really everything that it needs to do in a solid axle chassis, because that's ultimately what we do. You know, we are the Roadster Shop. We're a chassis manufacturer, and this is one of our most popular chassis that's underneath it. So a 1970 SPEC chassis. There is nothing different on this chassis than you would get if you just called the Roadster Shop and ordered a SPEC 1970 Chevelle. It's got the upgraded coilovers, which you can check the box on your quote for the single adjustable SV coilovers, sway bar option up front, Baer brakes on all four corners, 9-inch Ford out back, super straightforward, off-the-shelf, powder-coated black. But the ride quality is so damn good in this. When you take a car to this level and it's as tight as it is, coupled with this chassis, it truly is surreal driving it. It's probably you know, I don't want to call it a shortcoming, but it's one of the things you notice in the Survivor cars is that there's certain inherent issues with the car that are there from the factory. You know, you might have some wind noise or some rattles or something that were in that factory car. This thing, it's sound deadened to the moon. It's interior flawlessly finished, coupled with that chassis. I mean, I don't know that there's a luxury car that I've been in that rides any better. You know, granted, you're getting a little bit of exhaust note because it's a monster motor in it with 3-inch stainless steel exhaust out the back. If this car was silent, I feel like you'd think you're in a brand new BMW 7 Series. No joke, it's got luxury car ride quality. Drivetrain wise, Texas Speed LSX 454, Bowler T56, I think it's the LT, the long tail shaft trans, which drags the shifter back just a little bit further in the car and places it, you know, some particular muscle cars, it lands it kind of more at your hip or right off the steering wheel where you want that shifter to land. 9-inch axle, RSSV 4.0 shocks on all 4 corners, and Baer 14-inch 6-piston brakes up front, 13 out back. That right there is probably the only parts that are, I guess, somewhat stock, or what I would say standard on this car. Because when you get into the modifications and the rest of this vehicle, it's insane. I mean, it really is. So when you pop the hood on it, you know, I mentioned 454 LSX. The motor's about 700 horsepower, somewhere in that range, and dressed up to the classic 454 big block look. So it's taken definitely a step further than your typical Survivor LS to big block conversion. I mean, this thing, it's got perfectly scaled valve covers that we machined in-house, that it's not just a big block cover bolted on. It's probably about like 75% of the overall size of a big block cover, which puts it more in proportion to the LS cylinder heads, but still gives you the look of a big block. All the plumbing on the car is hardline stainless steel, powder coated. The line clamps are machined, designed in-house, got a billet aluminum with a little stainless wrap to give you the appearance of some of those cheap little steel clamps that would have been on the inner fenders. And then the fenders are closed off, the openings in the front, overflow tank, little filler panel, vintage looking beadwork, that's super deep draw that would have looked appropriate, you know, era correct. Wasn't necessarily on the car originally, but the era correct beadwork. Even the firewall, I mean, we had the forethought to stamp outward beads for just mounting bosses to stand the breather lines and, you know, some of the fuel lines and everything off the firewall. So it's just wildly detailed. It's crazy. I love the car. Absolutely love the car. I think I share the same OCD issue as Brent does. So seeing things that are just perfect, it's pretty nice. There's like Survivor cars that are super imperfect and you can deal with them and you love them. There's nothing in between, and then there's perfection. And I think this is as close to perfection as you can get in a 1970 Chevelle. Brent, I don't believe he's ever had anything with an LS, so he wanted something that had that big block rumble. And the only way to get that big block rumble is cubic inches and camshaft. So Texas Speed put this together. Nasty sounding idle. All around, the car just sounds wicked. Retains, you know, what I would say is just about flawless drivability. In anything that's got that big of a cam, you're going to have a little bit of bucking down at super low, you know, RPMs when you're just trying to get the car moving. But you see me driving the car, you learn to drive around it almost immediately. And the thing rips. I mean, super fast car, super fun. The power is everywhere you need it. It's torquey at really any RPM. So I think in the engine bay, I mean, there's so much detail, but we got to show some stills in this, because as you look through all those details, it's like it's still mind-blowing. I still find myself, when the hood's open and the car's sitting in our showroom, that I like just stare at it, right? Because there's so much to take in. The air cleaner assembly with the emblem on the top, that's just a subtle radius to it that's completely machined instead of being a sticker like you would typically see. It's like everything is just like in excess of what it was. All the fabrication on this car was done in-house by Scott Powers, fabricator that's been with us a long time, and he kind of lived with this project for a long time. And starting up at the front, it's a full custom bumper. So I know a lot about these 70 Chevelles. I've built a handful of them myself. We've built a number of them through the shop. So I know all the things that you can get away with just cutting and tucking, and I know the things where you just kind of need to throw the towel in and say, we got to start from scratch. And the front bumper is kind of one of those. So that front bumper, it's almost, you know, at this point, like 90% scratch built. And these cars, they just don't lend themselves well to just like a nice, easy tucked bumper. So 69 Camaro, for any first gen Camaros, a number of other cars, you could just take that bumper, especially the rear one, slice it, take a ½ inch out of it, tuck it in, and boom, you've got a nice fitting bumper. These, they form to the car, and they're so integral to the car that you've got to do two things. You've got to reshape the bumper to flow with the lines of the car, but you also need to reshape the car to allow the bumper to come in and flow with the lines of the car. Super duper detailed, and right up to the headlight bezels on this car, it rolls up, it gaps out perfectly to those. Eliminated the front license plate. I didn't want the bumper to just look big and flat like, you know, I sometimes think these cars can take on almost a like Monte Carlo look when you just like smooth the bumpers or eliminate certain things. So did a nice little detail in the center of the bumper to clean that up, leave a little slot in it, and then all that plating work was done by Advanced Plating. When you move up from the bumper, you've got the grille assembly. So there's grill trim that goes around this 70 SS grill, and it's the most ill-fitting piece in the history of vehicles ever made in the United States of America. That's a fact. I think you can Google it. It just sucks. So it's always irritated me on cars we've built in the past. It wasn't an easy feat. Chris Gray designed all that. It's a multi-piece machine part, all machined on a mild steel that's welded together and then again plated by Advanced Plating. So that presses right over the factory grill, but it eliminates those overlap seams like you get on the four corners of those, and then it allows you to chrome plate it. It's got a tolerance built in for that, and really cleans up the whole front of it. You know, it's funny when you look at things like that, I think that we're going all in, that this is the way to do it. This is going to be the baddest ass grill in the world. And then there's a step up from that. You know, I'm seeing now guys fully machining the entire 70 Chevelle grill, which it's another option, but I think the execution of this it's pretty spectacular. It much like the rest of the car, it keeps with that theme of the car looking very original and kind of sort of untouched. Makes people wonder, why does this thing look so damn good? From there, all the headlight buckets, everything's kind of like mildly reshaped, tweaked to just fit flawlessly. Front edge of the hood, all filled, smooth, everything there just fits perfectly. Every gap on this car has been cut, split, formed, welded, searching for absolute perfection. All down the sides of the hood where you'd have these factory overlap seams. Anywhere that there was something ugly from the factory, we've blended it, we've filled it, we've cleaned it up. Just, I mean, it's a monumental workload. And some of that stuff, it's just time consuming. You know, you get into it and you just got to have the eye and the forethought to say, well, you know, what's going to happen in the body shop when we take this thing and we start doing some filler work? How do we clean this up and finish it off nicely? All the seams, everything welded up. The hood itself, it needed hood pins so that it had that factory 454 LS6 SS look. But you know, you don't want to put those little thin stainless washers on it. And it really didn't call for any of those like modern billet hood latch, hood pin assemblies. So again, we machined something, went with the like less is more on that. Super simplistic, but again, just to make it look like a little bit nicer, we recessed it into the hood. So if you look at the top, those hood pin bezels are recessed down in the sheet metal of the hood. And if you flip over to the other side and you look at it, it's recessed from the underside. And then there's recessed bumpers. So This car was basically built with every single component, every piece of rubber, every latch, you name it, all in Baer steel, to make absolutely certain that we covered every single detail. Coming up on a little officer of the law here, and seldom do I have actual license plates on these vehicles.
Coming that way, I have a neighbor calling.
And we are good to go. I think this one might actually have plates on it, Cali plates, so we're all good there. Yeah, let's go through the whole body on this thing and then we'll dive under the hood, because the body appears stock, lots and lots of little modifications here and there. So whole sides of the car, you know, short of just tightening it up, cleaning up lines, gapping the car flawlessly, most of the side of the car is fairly stock. We did recess the marker lights in the rear of the car, which is a cool detail because it's, you know, they always look like an afterthought. They lay over the top of the sheet metal. So those are completely designed in-house, machined by Locar actually, along with front marker lights. So there's marker light assembly, parking light assembly in the bumper, also machined by Locar, designed by us. All that stuff is just a perfect nod to the original car, but gets rid of all the ugly, all the plastic, all the ill-fitting stuff that would ordinarily come with the car. As you get to the rear, wheel and tire fitment is tough on these cars, because as you lower them down, which the stance on the SPEC chassis, in my opinion, is just awesome. It's like a conservatively low stance, where it doesn't look like a bagged car that you just dropped on the ground, but you run into that kind of like Winnebago effect, I just coined that term, so that's now a phrase, the Winnebago effect. What that is as you lower these cars, you're always concentrating on the inner wheelhouses, right? Because you want to widen the inner wheelhouse to get fatter tires, but seldom do you look at modifying the outer wheelhouse. So a lot of these muscle cars, that outer wheelhouse, it curves in so drastically and sits so far away from the outer quarter skin that it forces the tire inboard, even though you're mini tubbing the car. So when it sits down low, you end up with this big gap in the back of the car, and it, you know, I think like a Survivor, it looks great. Most people might not pick it up, but again, it just plays with the proportions of the car, that we've got a 325 in the back, but it's shoved so far outboard that we've trimmed the wheel lips out. And when you just look at the profile of the car, I think it's, in my opinion, it's super noticeable. It's again one of those things that I think you could easily overlook, but it just makes you like the car and wonder why this car looks so good. Moving past the back wheels and get to the back bumper, just like the front, one of those bumpers that just about needed to be scratch built. Massive modifications to that, most of it hand shaped, hand fabricated in-house. The taillight assemblies, 70 Chevelle taillights kind of suck. They're just, it's an ugly taillight. Man, looks borderline like a trailer taillight in my opinion. It's the only thing on the 71 and 72 that I actually kind of like better, is the dual round taillights, but 70's so iconic that you got to keep with it. We just tidied it up. We modeled that. Chris designed a brand new taillight assembly. It's a multi-piece that stacks up, really, really cool. Machined the lenses, machined the housings, and Locar did all that. RoadsterShop design, machined by our buddies over at Locar. And again, just one of those little touches that Chris Gray did that really just makes the back of the car look sick, in my opinion. On an SS, you've got to have that rubber bumper on the rear. Well, the rubber bumper, it's a rubber bumper, like a chunky random piece that's adhesive backed that sticks on the back of the car. So we ordered one to scan it and look at it, and then for 3 years now, that particular piece is stuck on the side of my son's bunk bed. And we'll always remember that that's the inspiration behind the rear billet piece on this car. So that part completely machined out of billet aluminum, and to keep costs somewhat in check, we did it out of 2 pieces because it is contoured. There's a slight kink in the middle of that, and then we just built a 10 gauge fixture, mounted it to it, welded it, and that 10 gauge fixture also went with to the chrome plater. So it's chrome plated, so you can have a nice thin outer ring and then flat blacked throughout the rest of it. Beneath it, custom exhaust tips. 70 Chevelle SS 454 had, you know, somewhat of a unique visible exhaust tip, and something needed to be there, but it needs to be integral to the car. Just hanging under the back of the car just wouldn't look right. So huge challenge in trying to figure out how you can machine those and fasten them as well, because you want them plated. They're getting fastened to a stainless steel exhaust system. So I'm sure we can break down that assembly to show you how they are clamshelled, machined out of stainless steel, TIG welded together, and then completely plated from there. And there are so many pieces on this car, and I like to think that I know almost everything, but I'm a little unsure now if they were stainless or mild steel. But they are plated. They've got bosses mounted on the top, and then they gap to the rear lower valance on the car. Flared out, perfectly gapped around the exhaust tip, and just completely cleans up the rear of the car. So again, from there, it's just tightening up gaps. You open the deck lid, everything is finished flawlessly. You open the doors, look inside the door jambs. The little quarter vent window assemblies are recessed. The ill-fitting weather strips are recessed. It's like it just never ends, but it's all factory-ish stuff that just fits way, way better. The on the A-pillar trim, that little piece that transitions from that chrome or stainless A-pillar drip rail trim piece to the roof trim piece, again, it like folds over, fits terrible. That's a machine part. We assembled the car, scanned the car, machined that, plated it. Everything else is flash chromed on those thin parts, and it just cleans everything up like super duper nice. The paint and body work, we actually joined forces with some good buddies of ours, Goolsby Customs down in Alabama, who you know, Jonathan's known for great paint work. We got the car to a certain stage and just felt that with our workload and knowing his skill set and the quality he delivered, we brought the car to Jonathan to take care of the final body work and all the paint work on it. And yeah, it speaks for itself. Jet black with white SS stripes. I mean, it's just strikingly beautiful. It's a huge chore to maintain it. You're a glutton for punishment if you paint a car black that's this laser straight, but I don't think anything beats it. It is absolutely beautiful. The wheels are all done by Jesse Greening of Greening Auto Company. So the wheels are in themselves, I mean, it's kind of a masterpiece. We've done the 70 Chevelle looking Magnum wheel in the past. We didn't do it to this level. So there's an entire machined beauty ring that goes around this outer hoop of the wheel that fastens to the wheel center, and it allows you to scale down the center of the wheel and make that, you know, kind of like a conical shape. And it takes what would typically be a 1918, and I think it, you know, it almost takes it down to like a 17, you know, 16 looking combo. Just a smaller diameter center puts the proportions way in check. So when you look at this car compared to the previous one we did, that was again, nice set of one-off custom wheels, but standard barrels on the outer. I think the proportions are just spectacular on the way these wheels complement the car. Total package there. So it takes an army, you know, it really does to create something like this. On the RoadsterShop side, and we've played a part in some pretty spectacular builds done by other very reputable, well-known, famous builders by contributing the chassis portion. But we do the same. That's something where we reach out to the people who we know do it and do it right. And Jesse's a great resource for wheels. God, as I'm talking through this, I realize just how many parts and pieces we've made, touched, modified to get this car to where it is today. That it's just mind-blowing that you look at it as a whole and it just looks right. But sometimes that's what it takes. It's the sum of all those little parts and pieces. Interior-wise, the interior all done by my good buddy Jeremy Carlson over at Avant Garde, you know, down in Florida there. Huge nod to the original car, but flawlessly executed. And that's one of those things where when you work with great partners, you know, you trust that you can turn the reins over to them, and that's exactly what we did. Short of showing Jeremy a few pictures, telling him what we were looking for, I mean, he took it and ran with it. So the door panels, all 3D printed, machined inlays, chrome plated inlays. Again, at a glance, very 70 Chevelle SS looking, but it's just flawless fit and finish. We clean off some of the pinch welds on the car as we're putting it together in fabrication, just so he can gap his trim panels out a little bit nicer and make the door meet the quarter flawlessly. Seats in the car, they're 70 Chevelle, original 70 Chevelles. just cut up. We've lowered them, we've moved them back, we've foamed them so that all the springs are out of them. It's just one of those cars that the seat recognizable, and to just put a Recaro in it, I think it works great in a survivor car or something that's more driver quality. But when you've got something that you spent this much time trying to make look so original, you got to start with the original proportions of the seat. So he integrated the headrests in them so that you get a little support, but just again, flawless execution by Mr. Carlson over there. He gave me sun visors on this one, so I can't talk too much shit today about his lack of sun visor placement. Steering wheel is actually the same wheel that we're using in Survivor stuff. It's very 70 Chevelle looking. It would just fit the bill. So Lecara 3-spoke on there. Dakota Digital RTX gauges, that they're just perfect. No need to change from what those were. Factory radio was kept so that the dash looks original, but we sacrificed the original volume knob and incorporated a JL Audio volume control. So everything on this Bluetooth through your phone, but you've got volume control right there at your fingertips. And then it's vintage air. I think this was probably one of the last of the Gen 4 units that's in this particular car. This center console piece. So keeping the factory center console in this, again, it's super recognizable as 70 Chevelle, but we machined this super cool bezel, shifter bezel that incorporates the power window switches. And then the whole exterior of this console has been smoothed out, bodywork painted, leather wrapped on the top, little machine inlay that goes in the trim piece right here. So it takes all those things to make this look the way that it looks. You know, it's funny when you do these super high-end cars, we've done so many in the past, sometimes, you know, they have a tendency of going like too far to the point where you've done things with exotic engines. You've placed things in kind of unusual places where you lose the ergonomics of the car. You've pushed the boundaries of ride height and track width and wheel fitment that you really get nervous driving the car, or you don't drive it at all. And in a sense, some of these things do become trailer queens. I mean, I hate to say it, not that they're not capable, but there's things that just don't make you want to daily drive the car. But this is a great way to approach a car, in my opinion. This is a car that has as much, if not more, modifications in it than probably anything we've done. And hats off to Brent that he jumped in this thing and drove it on a road tour with us, about like 800 miles for a car that most guys would absolutely freak out if it got the most minute little rock chip. So Brent's a hell of a guy to do that. I think it's badass, and the car performed flawlessly on it. So I don't want to hear any of the trailer queen stuff, okay? Just throw that out the window. This thing, it's got just shy of 1,000 miles on it. It's very fresh, and it's about to head out west to Brent, where he's gonna start just driving the hell out of this car and having fun with it. Here I am. I mean, we've probably put 30 miles on this car while I'm doing this video, and I don't have to look at the temp gauge, I don't have to look at the oil pressure gauge, I don't have to look at anything, and the AC is cranking, and it's honestly like 95 degrees and humid out. That's what it's all about, is building something that's so bitchin', but it's even more badass to drive. So when the newness wears out of getting that like $200 billet trophy and taking the car to shows, and then you're left with kind of an old racehorse, what do you do with it? You know, you want something that you can drive. So kind of the second breath of life into this thing is that Brent has shown it, we've shown it, everybody's seen it, it's won some awards, it's super awesome, but now the fun begins. Now Brent gets the car and he gets to truly enjoy the functionality of the car, the drivability of it. It's just not a beautiful piece that's gonna sit in the garage.